My hospital bed was empty of the people I needed most because my children were at my daughter-in-law's party. The room smelled of disinfectant. The 4 in my arm beeped softly, reminding me how fragile I had become. I kept staring at the chair next to me. It stayed cold and empty. I told myself over and over, they'll come. They'll walk in any moment. But the minutes stretched into hours. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone, hoping for a message. Instead, I saw bright photos flooding my family group chat. My son, my daughter, their spouses all smiling under chandeliers, glasses of champagne raised high. My daughter-in-law posed in a glittering gown, cake behind her bigger than my hospital bed. A nurse peeked in, adjusting the monitor. Her voice was gentle, but her words pierced me. "Family usually fills this room," she whispered. I forced a smile, though my throat burned. Mine. They must be running late, but I knew the truth. They weren't late. They were celebrating. I scrolled down and found a message from my daughter-in-law. My chest tightened as I read her words. More important than an old woman's surgery. She had typed it with laughing emojis. I dialed my son's number, my thumb shaking. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. I tried again, desperation rising like fire in my chest. The second time, a text buzzed in. "Don't guilt us, Mom. We'll come tomorrow." Tomorrow? They thought I had a tomorrow guaranteed. I whispered to myself, the words slipping out like a prayer. One night can decide a life. The nurse gave me a look of pity. I turned my face toward the window, ashamed that she could see the tears sliding down my cheek. Another round of photos lit up my phone. My children laughing, arm in arm. The caption read, "Family first." I stared at those words until they blurred. Family first for them meant her, not me. I pressed the call button, asking for water. But what I really wanted was anyone to sit beside me. Every beep from the machines made me more aware of how alone I was. My mind drifted back to all the birthdays I had planned for them, cakes baked from scratch, gifts bought when money was short. I never once left them alone when they needed me. And now, on the night before my surgery, I was just forgotten. The door creaked. For a heartbeat, my heart leapt. I thought maybe one of them had finally come. But it was only the nurse again, adjusting the 4. She touched my arm softly. "You'll be okay," she said, her eyes full of sympathy. I swallowed hard. Will I? Even without them? She had no answer. She just looked away. The hallway echoed with distant footsteps. Every sound made me turn, hoping to see familiar faces. None came. Time dragged on. Midnight passed. I lay there staring at the ceiling, fighting sleep because fear gnawed at me. If I closed my eyes, would I wake again? And if I didn't, would they even notice before the party ended? Suddenly, the door swung open wider, and the doctor stepped in, clipboard in hand. His expression was firm, businesslike, but beneath it I caught a flicker of concern. "We need your children's signature for consent," he said. He looked around the room, at the empty chair, the silent phone. Then his eyes locked on mine. "Where are they?" And in that moment, with his question hanging heavy in the air, I realized I might be facing this fight completely alone. I dragged myself to the window. And from my ward, I could see the fireworks from her party. Bright sparks painted the night sky in gold and silver, while my room glowed with nothing but the pale light of a hospital lamp. The contrast was cruel. My chest tightened as I pressed my palm to the glass. Somewhere out there, just a few miles away, my children were laughing while I stood here, weak, stitched to tubes and wires. I wanted to believe, with every fragile breath, that they still loved me, that perhaps they would show up late, arms full of flowers, faces guilty but warm. But the silence of my phone was louder than the fireworks outside. I checked it again, screen blank. No missed calls. Only old photos of my daughter-in-law twirling in her sparkling gown. I told myself, they'll come when the party ends. But then another video appeared online. My son stood beside her, holding a glass high. She laughed into the microphone. "Your mother's surgery won't pay the bills." "I do." Her voice rang out, bold and mocking. The crowd erupted in laughter. My son threw his head back and joined in. I froze, the phone trembling in my hands. That was my son, the boy I once nursed through fevers, the boy I shielded from every storm. And now, he laughed at me. I sank into the stiff bed, heart aching. Every time I reached for the phone, hoping to see a message, I found nothing but more cruelty. A neighbor sent me a quiet text later that evening. "I overheard your daughter-in-law. She said, Old people always exaggerate. She'll be fine. Fine? Was lying alone in this room, praying I'd survive the night fine. I scrolled further and realized something else. None of our extended family was at that party. No cousins, no aunts, only wealthy friends, the ones my daughter-in-law wanted to impress. She hadn't built a family celebration. She had built a stage for herself. Another clip came up, one that made my blood run cold. She leaned toward a cluster of women and whispered, smug, "This house is mine now. The kids know who to side with." My heart pounded. My house? I thought of the living room where I once watched my children open gifts on Christmas morning, the kitchen where I had cooked meals for decades. My house wasn't hers. Not yet. Still, my mind clung to one fragile hope. Maybe they'll regret this. Maybe guilt will bring them to my side before dawn. But the minutes passed. The party grew louder. My phone stayed silent. I pressed my forehead to the cold glass, whispering into the night, "Do they even remember I exist?" The fireworks burst brighter, as if mocking me, and behind the explosion of colors I could almost hear her voice again. "Your mother's surgery won't pay the bills." My stomach twisted. How easily they dismissed me, the woman who had once been their entire world. Hours later, the nurse returned with a sealed envelope in her hands. Her face was careful, too careful, as she held it out. "This came from the billing office," she said softly. I frowned, ripping it open with weak fingers. My eyes scanned the words and my breath caught in my throat. "Payment guarantee canceled. Responsibility transferred." The nurse shifted uncomfortably. "Someone redirected your bill. Without a guarantee, we'll need immediate confirmation of coverage." I stared at her, my hands shaking. Someone had gone into my account, into my paperwork, and pulled away the safety net I had left for myself. The nurse's eyes met mine. "Do you know who might have canceled it?" But I already knew, and the thought made the room spin around me. My hands shook as I saw the hospital paperwork. My son had withdrawn my savings without telling me. The clerk slid the file across the counter, and in bold red letters, I read, "Account closed." My stomach lurched. That account wasn't just money. It was the security I had built for emergencies, their emergencies as much as mine. I had trusted my children, given them access with one simple rule: only touch it if life or death demanded it. And now it was gone. I flipped through the statements, my eyes blurring. Tens of thousands vanished in a single week. The withdrawal date burned into me. It was the exact day of her party. My chest tightened. Catering, luxury decorations, a live band. The very things I had watched on video from my lonely hospital bed. All bought with the money meant to keep me alive. I grabbed my phone, fingers trembling as I searched online. And there she was, my daughter-in-law, draped in sequins, smirking at the camera with a glass in hand. Her caption stabbed me. "Money well spent." I could hardly breathe. My money, my trust, my sacrifice, all twisted into her boast. "Excuse me, ma'am," the administrator said carefully, drawing my attention back. "Your son came in last week. He gave verbal instructions that you'd manage with insurance." I stared at her. Verbal instructions? My voice cracked, then hardened. "Agreed? With whose voice?" "Not mine." She shifted uneasily, lowering her gaze. "He said you were aware, that it was a family decision." A bitter laugh scraped out of me. "Family decision? No one asked me. They stole from me." The words echoed in the sterile office, and for the first time, I let the truth settle. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. It was betrayal. I pressed my palm against the desk to steady myself, but fury steadied me more than strength did. My children, my own flesh and blood, had drained my savings while I lay weak in a hospital bed. I thought of the years I worked double shifts, the nights I stitched clothes by hand just to pay their school fees. I had built that account coin by coin, dreaming it would protect us all. Now, it had funded fireworks and wine. The administrator spoke again, her voice quiet. "We'll need an alternate payment arrangement soon. Without it, the hospital cannot." I cut her off, lifting my chin. "I'll find a way." But not through them. The walk back to my ward felt heavier than any surgery scar. My body was weak, but my heart burned with a fire I hadn't felt in years. The betrayal no longer confused me, it clarified everything. They had chosen her, chosen greed, chosen comfort. And in that choice, they had abandoned me. When I reached my room, I sank into the bed, clutching the documents against my chest like a shield. My phone buzzed just then. A message. For a moment, hope flared. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe guilt had reached them at last. But no, it was another photo from the party. My daughter-in-law blowing kisses to the camera, my son holding her waist. The caption read, "Celebrating our empire, built on my blood." I closed my eyes, whispering to myself, no more. They won't steal another piece of me. Just then, the door creaked open. A familiar voice, softer, gentler than I had heard in weeks, called my name. It was an old friend, a neighbor from years past, carrying a small basket of fruit. She looked at me with sorrow. "I heard what they did," she whispered, squeezing my hand. Then she leaned closer, her words sharp as glass. "You should know. They're planning to move you out of the family home." Her warning struck me harder than the paperwork. My money was gone. And now, my home, the last thing I had left, was in their sights. I came home with stitches still raw, only to find my wardrobe half empty. The house smelled of stale perfume and champagne, as if the party had never really ended. Dim light from the chandelier cast long shadows across the living room, where expensive shoes and branded handbags still lay scattered, carelessly abandoned like trophies. Glitter clung to the carpet, sparkling mockingly under my tired feet. I paused in the hallway, clutching the strap of my hospital bag. The house I had built brick by brick felt foreign, louder, younger, and crueler. I climbed the stairs slowly, hoping at least my room would greet me like a loyal friend. But when I twisted the knob, it refused to turn. A new lock. My own bedroom barred against me. I pressed my forehead against the wood, the stitches in my side burning. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, but then I saw it. A strip of masking tape along the doorframe marked with bold letters, "Private." My hands trembled as I staggered back. I went to the wardrobe in the guest room where I had once kept spare clothes. When I slid it open, half of my belongings were gone. The silk sari my mother had given me on my wedding day missing. My jewelry case gone, save for a few trinkets no one would bother to steal. My breath hitched. The house echoed with silence, yet I felt her presence before I heard her voice. "You're back already?" I turned. There she was, my daughter-in-law, standing at the top of the stairs, her arms folded, her lips curved in a sneer. She wore a robe trimmed with gold thread, one of the expensive new purchases, no doubt bought with the money drained from my savings. Her eyes swept over me like I was an intruder. "You should have stayed longer at the hospital. This is a young couple's house now." I swallowed, the weight of her words pressing into my chest. "This is the house I built," I whispered. She laughed softly, a sound as sharp as broken glass. "Built, yes. But walls don't stay loyal. Papers do. And those papers will have my name soon enough." My eyes flicked toward the dining table. Scattered across it were documents, stamped and signed legal papers I hadn't seen before. I moved closer, my heart racing. Property transfer forms, contracts, deeds. She noticed my gaze. "Don't touch what isn't yours anymore," she said coldly. "The children know who to side with." Her words stung more than any wound. My own blood had chosen her. I lowered myself into a chair, the stitches in my abdomen throbbing. I wanted to scream, to rage, but instead I sat in silence. My dignity was the only weapon I had left, and I would not give her the pleasure of seeing it shattered. Quietly, I gathered what I could: some clothes, a few photographs, my medicines. Each item I placed in my bag felt like a farewell. Behind me, she clicked her tongue. "Stop clinging to scraps. The children are mine now. Everything here is mine." I zipped the bag shut and turned to face her fully. "Not for long," I said softly, though my voice carried a steel I didn't know I still possessed. For the first time, her smile faltered. Just for a flicker of a second, I held that moment close to my heart. Carrying my bag, I moved toward the door. Every step hurt, but my resolve grew stronger. I would not be the woman she discarded. I would not vanish quietly into the shadows of this house. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I whispered to myself, "I will leave you behind before you throw me out." The gate creaked as I pushed it open. The house loomed behind me, dark, glittering, full of betrayal. But in that moment, I felt something new stirring in my chest. Not despair, not weakness, resistance. At dawn, I stepped out with only one suitcase. No one noticed, because they were still asleep after drinking. The street was hushed, washed in pale gray light. My stitches pulled with every step, but the air outside felt lighter than the suffocating silence of the house I had left behind. For the first time in weeks, no mocking voice followed me, no locked doors, no sneers, just the sound of my own footsteps echoing toward the bus terminal. The station, The benches were cold metal, lined with weary travelers dozing against their bags. A vendor poured steaming tea into chipped cups, the sharp scent of cardamom filling the air. I sat with my suitcase pressed against my knees. A woman stripped of wealth, stripped of home, yet strangely, carrying something heavier than either freedom. The bus rattled down country roads, and I closed my eyes. Each mile between me and that house loosened a knot in my chest. By the time I arrived in town, the sun had climbed higher, painting the sky gold. I found a small room for rent above a shuttered tailor's shop. The paint peeled in long strips from the walls, and the window rattled when touched, but the air smelled clean and tainted by betrayal. When I lay down on the thin mattress, the quiet around me wasn't loneliness, it was peace. Still, fear sat in the corner like an unwelcome guest. I had only a small sum tucked into my bag, barely enough to last the month. What would I eat? How would I live? The questions clawed at me, threatening to undo the fragile calm I had built. That afternoon, I met someone at the corner tea stall, an old friend, Kamala, who recognized me instantly. Her face softened with concern. "You look thinner," she said, touching my arm gently. What happened? I hesitated, shame pressing against my throat, but her eyes were kind, patient. I told her only part of the truth, that my family had grown distant, that I needed space. She nodded slowly, as though she already guessed more than I said. "I run a little shop now. It's not much, but I could use help. A few hours a day. It will keep your hands busy and your heart steady." Tears pricked at my eyes. "You don't pity me?" Kamala smiled. "Why should I? You don't need them to survive. You need truth." Her words settled into me like a seed taking root. Later, at the bus stop while running a small errand for her, a stranger leaned against the railing, sipping tea. He noticed me staring at the horizon. "Starting over?" he asked kindly. "Something like that," I murmured. He tilted his head. "Remember, this peace matters more than riches." I carried his words with me back to my rented room. They echoed in the stillness like a prayer, but news traveled fast. By the end of the week, I overheard whispers from neighbors in the market. My daughter-in-law had told them I had run away in shame, that I couldn't face the family after my lies. The sting of humiliation returned, sharp and fresh. For a moment, I felt myself shrinking again, ready to vanish into the cracks of the world. But then I opened my bag and pulled out the small notebook I had bought at the stall. I began writing every detail, every date, every cruel word, every missing item. I wrote until my fingers cramped. The pages became my silent witnesses, my proof. If they wanted to twist the truth, then I would record it. My words would be my shield. That night, as the lamplight flickered against the peeling paint, I read back what I had written. My voice was steady, stronger than I remembered. Kamala's words returned. "You need truth," and I whispered back to myself. Truth will be my weapon. The fear of survival, of hunger, of loneliness, all began to fade. In its place grew something solid, something fierce, determination. I was no longer a woman begging for scraps of affection. I was someone who could fight. As I closed the notebook, my phone buzzed against the table. The screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. My breath caught as I read. "They're filing property transfer papers tomorrow. If you want to fight, come now." They thought I was too weak to fight, but I walked into court with every document they forged. The courtroom was packed, its walls heavy with the scent of polished wood and whispers of scandal. Rows of curious onlookers filled the benches, their eyes darting between me and the family that once bore my name with pride. My children sat stiffly behind my daughter-in-law, their heads bowed, their loyalty displayed not to their mother, but to the woman who had poisoned their hearts. I clutched the notebook in my lap, the weight of every recorded betrayal pressing against my palms. Fear threatened to creep in, but I forced my back straight. This was no hospital ward, no locked door, no party mocking me from a distance. This was a place where truth had a voice. The judge entered, robes flowing, gavel striking wood. "Court is in session." The daughter-in-law rose first, voice dripping with false sweetness. "Your Honor, this woman is unfit to manage property. She forgets. She exaggerates. She is paranoid." Her words drew nods from the children, who echoed her lies like rehearsed lines. "My mother loses track of days," my son said flatly. "She imagines things," my daughter-in-law added with a pitying sigh. "Old people often do." Their words sliced into me, sharper than any scalpel. But I did not falter. Instead, I placed the folder of documents on the table before me and waited for my turn. The judge turned to me. "Madam, Do you have a response? I rose slowly, my knees aching, but my voice rang steady. Yes, Your Honor, I have proof. Gasps rippled through the room as I handed the clerk my documents. Bank records stamped in red ink, printouts of transfers, screenshots from the very night of the party. On the day my surgery was scheduled, here are the withdrawals, I said, tapping the statements. Every coin of my savings drained. And here I pointed to the enlarged screenshot projected on the screen. My daughter-in-law, her face smug, her caption bold, money well spent. The murmurs in the gallery grew louder. The judge raised an eyebrow. Do you deny this is your account, ma'am? He asked the daughter-in-law. Her smile faltered. Those were family expenses. She agreed. I cut in, my voice sharper now. With whose voice? Not mine. The judge held up another sheet of paper, a property transfer form stamped with urgency. Is this your signature? I stepped forward, heart pounding, and looked at the paper that was meant to erase me. The handwriting was close, but I knew every curl, every slant of my own pen. This was not mine. No, I said firmly. And here is the proof. From my bag, I pulled older verified documents, deeds I had signed years ago, with my original, authentic signature. Side by side, the forgery trembled in its falsehood. The judge examined them carefully, then looked back at me. You are certain? I held his gaze. With my life. Suddenly, my daughter-in-law's composure shattered. She leapt to her feet, her voice shrill. She's lying. She's twisting everything. The old woman is confused. She always has been. The judge's gavel slammed down, silencing the uproar. Enough. The court will hear witnesses. One by one, they came. The nurse who found me abandoned with an unpaid bill. The neighbor who overheard her mocking laughter. Old people always exaggerate. Even the vendor from the hospital, Calf, who had seen me waiting alone for hours while my family celebrated elsewhere. Each voice built a fortress of truth around me. With every testimony, I felt the fear peel away, layer by layer, until what remained was not weakness, but triumph. The judge's voice rang clear over the courtroom. The evidence is sufficient. The withdrawals match the timeline of the party. The boasts online confirm misuse of funds. The signature does not match. And the testimonies prove neglect. He raised the gavel once more, eyes fixed on my daughter-in-law, who now sat trembling, her painted nails drumming nervously against the bench. This property, he declared, remains with its rightful owner, and fraud charges will be investigated. The gavel struck the wood with finality, the sound echoing like thunder through the hushed room. For the first time in months, my children did not look at me with scorn or dismissal. They looked away, ashamed, as though realizing too late the gravity of their betrayal. I exhaled, my body trembling, not with fear, but with the release of a burden too long carried. The courtroom blurred for a moment as tears stung my eyes. I had not only defended my home, I had reclaimed myself. My children rushed toward me after the verdict, not with love, but with fear of losing their comfort. The courthouse doors swung open, and I stepped into the blinding light of cameras. Reporters pressed forward, their shutters clicking like 1,000 impatient clocks. Questions rose in a storm, voices demanding quotes, reactions, anger, but I gave them none. I simply walked forward, the papers in my hand proof that truth had finally spoken. On the courthouse steps, I heard the hurried footsteps of my children. My son's hand grabbed my arm, not tenderly, but desperately. Mom, wait, he whispered, his voice cracked with panic. We only listened to her. She twisted everything. We didn't mean. The words tangled in his throat. Behind him, my daughter-in-law's eyes blazed like a cornered animal. She leaned close enough that only I could hear her venom. You'll regret this. You think a judge can protect you forever? I did not flinch. Her threats rolled off me like dust shaken from an old coat. My daughter, who had once laughed along with her, now clutched my sleeve, her face pale. Please, Mom, we'll change. We'll take care of you this time. I looked at their faces. The same faces I had once kissed goodnight, the same voices I had once prayed for. For a moment, my heart ached with the memory of what could have been. But memory was not enough. You already chose, I said quietly, my voice firm but steady. Now I choose me. The words left my lips like the closing of a door. The crowd around us murmured, neighbors whispering, exchanging looks. They had heard the testimonies. They had seen the evidence. No longer could my children hide behind stories of a forgetful mother. The truth stood taller than their lies. I stepped down the courthouse stairs, slow and steady, my bag tucked close. Reporters shouted for a statement, but I gave them only silence. My silence was my dignity. Behind me, I heard my son's voice crack again. Please, don't leave us. But I did not turn. The bus station. The same cold metal benches greeted me. This time, they did not feel like exile. They felt like a waiting place, a threshold to something I had chosen. When the bus pulled up, I climbed aboard, my suitcase light in my hand. I settled into a window seat, watching the courthouse shrink in the distance. Through the glass, I saw the figures of my children, still lingering, still arguing, still bound by the woman who had nearly destroyed me. I pressed my palm against the cool window, not in farewell, but in release. The bus rumbled forward, carrying me away from betrayal, away from the house filled with locks and lies. Each turn of the wheels seemed to strip away another layer of sorrow. For the first time in years, I felt no weight pressing on my chest, no obligation to please, no fear of abandonment, only air, only light, only freedom. I may be alone, I whispered to my reflection in the window, but I am finally free. The words echoed back at me, not with loneliness, but with strength. And as the city stretched before me, unknown and unpromised, I felt the future opening wide, not as a gift from anyone else, but as something I had claimed with my own hands. The morning sun hit my new window, and for once, I felt peace instead of betrayal. Light spilled through the thin curtains, painting the walls of my small apartment in gold. The room was simple whitewashed walls, a narrow bed, a second-hand table, but on the sill sat a green potted plant, its leaves stretching toward the light. It was the first living thing I had chosen for myself in years. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, breathing in the silence. There was no laughter meant to wound, no footsteps that carried judgment, no locks turning behind me. Just the hum of the city below and the steady rhythm of my own heart. Yes, the loneliness was sharp sometimes. A silence that once felt like punishment now lingered as choice. My children's faces drifted into my mind, but instead of breaking me, they only reminded me of what I had survived. Wealth had been drained from my accounts, yet I realized something profound: I was not empty. My dignity remained, and dignity was wealth they could never spend. That week, I opened a new bank account in my name alone. This time, no shared access, no signatures given away. The clerk smiled as I signed the form, and I felt as though I had signed a Declaration of Independence. In the evenings, I wrote, page after page. I poured out my story: the silence of the hospital room, the laughter from a party that drowned out my pain, the courtroom where truth finally spoke. My words filled a journal, not as bitterness, but as warning. If one woman read it and chose her dignity sooner than I had, then my pain would not be wasted. One afternoon, a knock startled me. When I opened the door, two old friends stood there: Kamala and another I hadn't seen in years. They carried small bags of fruit and warm smiles. "You look lighter," Kamala said as she set the fruit on the table. I laughed softly, touching the plant by my window. Because I left the weight behind. We sat together, sharing tea, sharing silence that felt comfortable, not cold. For the first time in months, I felt surrounded, not by betrayal, but by care freely given. On my birthday, I did not wait for calls that would never come. Instead, I gathered a few true friends in my little apartment. We ate simple food, sang softly, and lit one candle in a small cake. It was not luxury, it was not grand, but every smile around that table was real. And real was more than enough. As the evening ended, I returned to my journal, closing its worn cover with care. I traced my fingers along the spine as though sealing the past within its pages. My children chose a party over my life, I whispered into the quiet. I chose my life over them, and in that moment, the words did not sting. They freed me. The morning sun would come again tomorrow, and for the first time in a long time, I would greet it not as a victim, but as a woman who had begun her new dawn. Dignity is worth more than loyalty bought with money. When betrayal comes, choosing self-respect is the ultimate victory. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories of strength and justice.